A midsummer ritual. Pallet by pallet, Loyalists construct giant bonfires that will be lit at the height of their marching season next month. A tense moment at the best of times, but even greater unease this year. Loyalists are raging at a core element of the Brexit deal, which in their eyes weakens their place within the UK, the Northern Ireland Protocol, which has led to checks on goods travelling from Great Britain. Fighting that protocol will now be the main mission of the incoming leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, a coronation for Sir Jeffrey Donaldson after an abrupt end last week to the 21-day reign of Edwin Poots.
Are you still leader of the party?
Hold those faces steady, guys.
You go across a little bit.
Still a minister carrying out his duties, today meeting school children with fellow members of the cross-party executive.
Did I think I would be in this job that I'm in now? No, I didn't.
And in that playground, new signs of DUP unity, with a warm welcome for Sir Jeffrey from the party's first minister, who had been nominated by the fallen leader.
I had spoken to Jeffrey over the course of the weekend. I encouraged him to put his name forward. I indicated to him that if he was to do that, he was going to have my full support, and of course he will get my full support.
From opposing sides of their party's divide, Paul Given and Jeffrey Donaldson have one message for the government on the protocol: agree major changes with the EU or take unilateral action. Were you getting good signals from your point of view from the Secretary of State?
Yes, we were, and the Secretary of State indicated in those meetings that he was confident that there was going to be very significant progress made that he believed was as a result of the Democratic Unionist Party's representations, and that would show that there was very significant progress that was going to be made. We need to see those words translate into real, tangible actions.
This has been a wretched month for the DUP and the Unionist cause. Bitter and highly personal divisions have played out in prime time, prompting a simple and united response from nationalists to the DUP. You supported Brexit, learn to live with the consequences. But now the DUP and the wider Unionist family are hoping to set aside their differences and unite around a demand for an overhaul of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the new DUP leader, a wizened veteran of Westminster, is playing a careful game. Jeffrey Donaldson is biding his time as the clock counts down to a 30th of June deadline when the government must decide whether to embark on a unilateral extension of grace periods designed to ease checks across the Irish Sea. No public appearance today by Donaldson as he bats the ball over to the government. Nor should we expect much from him on Saturday when the DUP Electoral College formally votes for him. DUP memo to the government and the EU. Time to move on the protocol before the deadline. A fully fledged leader next week after ratification by the party's executive, coinciding with the deadline on the protocol. DUP memo to government. You wouldn't want to lose another leader by failing to resolve the protocol by then.
So what was the toughest part of this year? Lockdown? But things are better now, aren't they?
Yes.
Sinn Fein is open to addressing some concerns.
Whilst there are issues to be resolved in the protocol, there is no room for it to be put in the bin. I mean, that's the message that's very clear from the EU side, and indeed actually it's a message that's been said by the British government themselves.
Now, if he wants to become First Minister, you have a say in that. If he asks a radical realtering of the Northern Ireland Protocol, will you say, terribly sorry, no?
Well, there's no chance of that whatsoever, and obviously the protocol has been delivered and negotiated between the EU side and the British government, so it's not the Assembly who will decide on the next step in the protocol. Clearly we have an interest in it all, but the protocol is the best mitigation we have against the worst excess of Brexit, which the DUP themselves helped to deliver, the hardest possible Brexit. So it's now time to get on with power sharing, it's now time to make the protocol work, it's time to iron out the issues that need to be resolved. We can do that in the mechanisms that were agreed in the withdrawal agreement, so ditching the protocol is not an option on the table.
A former advisor to Unionist leaders expects change from the EU.
There are strong suggestions that they're willing to accept an extension of the grace period. Other things like, for example, the non-availability of cancer drugs in Northern Ireland, these big-ticket items, guide dogs for the blind, the real horror stories. One suspects the EU is going to move in a way which drops this from the protocol.
Lord Bew believes Jeffrey Donaldson has moved on from his days working for the late Enoch Powell in Northern Ireland and does not want to collapse power sharing.
The siren voices in unionism who say you must bring down the Assembly. The protocol is such an egregious crime against the unionist identity and its long-term threat is so great. These are not siren voices that he is anxious to listen to. But there is no doubt that Jeffrey Donaldson today is not even the young man who worked for Enoch Powell. He was a much harder figure then. But then you must remember there was violence in that era. Time has now moved on, and Donaldson for some years now has been an increasingly accomplished Westminster politician.
History hangs heavy over Northern Ireland, but the mood of this year's Loyalist marching season will be decided within days.
Nick Watt there. Well, joining us now, Sammy Wilson, the DUP Chief Whip in Westminster, Simon Hoare, the Conservative Chair of the Northern Ireland Select Committee, and John Finucane, Sinn Fein MP. Sammy Wilson, can I come to you? Because this time last week, your party had installed Edwin Poots already. He'd got the job over Jeffrey Donaldson. Now Mr Poots is gone. Donaldson's the leader. What problems do you think he's going to solve that Poots couldn't?
I mean, first of all, the problems for Northern Ireland remain the same as they were for Edwin Poots. The protocol, as your programme has said, is a major issue for Northern Ireland. The sustainability of the Assembly and getting the Assembly working is very important for us and for people in Northern Ireland. And of course, the promotion of the Union to ensure that we stay within the United Kingdom. As a Unionist leader, Jeffrey will have that as his one of his big priorities. But the government has to recognise the damage which it has done to the Union, and not just in Northern Ireland, but right across the United Kingdom, the way in which it has caused the Union to be wobbly as a result of the way in which it was prepared to cut Northern Ireland off from the rest of the United Kingdom. The protocol damages our economy. Most importantly, and this is why I can't understand politicians of any shade in Northern Ireland being quite happy to have 60% of our laws made in Brussels and taken out of the hands of the elected Assembly. That's basically what the protocol does, and that situation must be remedied. Otherwise, there's going to become an increasing rift between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. And Jeffrey's main objective, and he has made it quite clear today, his main objective will be, first of all, to undo the problems which have been caused by the democratic deficit, which is contained within the protocol. OK,
so let's hear from Simon Hoare on that one. I think you were accused, Simon, of sounding like a colonial leader by Sammy earlier today. What has the Northern Ireland Secretary promised Mr Donaldson? Do you know?
No, I don't, but Brendan Lewis is before the committee tomorrow morning at 9:30. So for those who are interested, tune in and have a listen.
Well, what we're hearing is that there will be an extension, and if not, the UK government will take unilateral action. Is that something that you would support and that you can see your government doing?
The government has acted unilaterally a few months ago, and I was critical of that. I think the crucial thing in all of this, Emily, is to build those, or to rebuild the relationships of trust, and they're pretty low at the moment. And piling on another lot of unilateral action isn't going to build the trust which is needed to sort out the residual problems of the protocol. So I think the government has been right this time to write to the EU to say this is what we would like to do. As I understand it, that is falling on fertile ground. The EU are keen to consider it and consider it positively and in a timely fashion. That will then, of course, allow the Joint Committee to continue its work in its deliberations, ironing out the creases, which I think anybody wants to see, so that then we can demonstrate to those doing business in and around Northern Ireland that having a foot in both markets, the internal market of the UK and the single market of the EU, actually presages quite a golden opportunity for economic growth and investment in Northern Ireland, which is something everybody should want to see.
And John Finucane, you'd be happy to see those creases ironed out, as it were, if there were changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol that allowed Jeffrey Donaldson to happily enter into power sharing again with Sinn Fein, would you?
Well, yes, everybody here is committed to power sharing, at least we hope so. But I have to come back and challenge the dishonesty in this debate, and I think Sammy made two references which highlights this. To say that the protocol is hugely damaging to this jurisdiction to the north, and to say that the protocol is hugely damaging to the economy here, is quite frankly dishonest. And I think that people need to remember that the DUP in this debate do not speak for the people here. They are in a minority of the MPs returned from this jurisdiction to Westminster, and they are in a minority on this view in our own Stormont Assembly. Apart from the DUP's own turmoil, the second biggest story on the news here this morning was our biggest dairy company announcing a huge international deal with a Danish company. And that would only have been possible but for the protocol. So the protocol represents huge economic potential. The amount of businesses that have expressed an interest in registering here and trading here because of the protocol is something that needs to be identified. If you listen to the DUP, you'd think that we lived in apocalyptic scenes of fighting over the last loaf of bread in the supermarket. So it's quite frankly not true.
Sammy Wilson, what are you complaining about then if you're seeing exporters doing better than ever because they have the advantages of both systems? This is something that is in your own head, the DUP head.
Well, of course, that's not true. The reason why exporters can still export to Denmark or whatever other part of the United Kingdom or the EU is nothing to do with the protocol. It's to do with the fact that we've got a free trade agreement with the EU. And Northern Ireland would have been able to benefit from that, whether the protocol was in place or whether the protocol wasn't.
No, the protocol allowed Northern Ireland to have a foot in both camps, as you know, because that's not something that the rest of GB can do.
No, Emily, of course the rest of GB can do that. The rest of GB has got a free trade arrangement with the rest of the EU. And we trade in cars, we trade in products across the borders because of that free trade arrangement.
But John's point was that the dairy farmers aren't sounding like they've got a big problem with it. This is just something that is very much an internal problem for the DUP.
Well, no, the dairy farmers benefit from the agreement which they have and trading with Denmark, not because of the protocol. They benefit from it because there is a free trade agreement between the United Kingdom and the EU. That's the reason for it. There may well be internal politics within the dairy farmers, the dairy industry that has always supported membership of the EU anyway, that want to downplay the impact of the protocol. But the fact of the matter is, anybody in Northern Ireland who trades with the rest of the European Union trades on the basis of the free trade arrangement. But what they can't do, and this is the important thing, they can't have free trade with the biggest market, which they have, namely GB.
Right. So let me ask Simon. Let me bring Simon on. Do you empathise with the DUP that the protocol is undermining stability and peace? That they think that the border checks and the customs checks make them feel like they're foreigners in their own country?
Frankly, no, and I do think it's worrying. And one has to ask what is the motivation for trying to dress up the protocol as some sort of constitutional assault on the integrity of the UK, drives us further towards a border poll, which is the only way that the constitutional integrity of Northern Ireland could be changed. When everybody from the Prime Minister down, including Lord Frost before our committee last week, was very clear, there is no constitutional impact that flows from the protocol. Now, I could be incredibly naive, I could be incredibly wrong on this, but I in all honesty, don't believe that people define their sense of belonging, their sense of loyalty, their sense of nationhood by the trading arrangements that moves a packet of breakfast cereal from one place to another. Nationhood and citizenship and all the things that go with it are much, much bigger than that.
OK, let me bring Sammy in.
It is unfortunate that people have whipped this up as some sort of constitutional outrage when all it is a trading arrangement.
Sammy.
Simon, I doubt very much if people in North Dorset would accept that they were equally part of the United Kingdom as others if a different set of laws applied to North Dorset than applied to other parts of the United Kingdom. If new laws made for North Dorset weren't made by politicians in North Dorset, they were made by politicians in Brussels, and if they overcome barriers bringing goods into North Dorset.
Sammy, all I would say to that,
let Simon come back in, and then I'll go to John.
Sammy, all I would say to that is that if the businesses and farmers of my constituency which many of them wanted, were given the opportunity to have access to the internal market of the United Kingdom and the single market of the European Union, they would bite your hand off, they would bite my hand off, they would bite the hand of anybody who was offering it.
Okay.
It's now time, I think, to stop, to focus on the positives, iron out the problems, focus on rebuilding the economy, and let's get all of us working together the prosperity agenda as envisaged in the Good Friday Agreement, felt by all sections of the Northern Ireland community.
Let me bring in John Finucane. Sorry, let me just bring in John Finucane, because we heard your leader, John, in Nick's piece saying that there was no chance of radical re-altering of the protocol. What happens if it is radically re-altered? What happens if there is unilateral action, or if the EU doesn't particularly budge, but the UK thinks it has to anyway?
Well, I think Michelle O'Neill in the piece, as I heard it, went on to develop that point by saying that the Assembly has no place in the negotiations between the European Union and the British government. That's just a political fact. I don't think unilateral action on behalf of the British government is particularly wise. It will lead to a response from the European Union. And I think people here are very cautious that they do not want to be collateral damage. We have already been collateral damage in Brexit, in the sense that we were forced out of the European Union against our will. The majority of people here did not vote for Brexit. They recognise that the protocol is the best mitigation against that. So I think the protocol itself contains the mechanisms by the way in which problems can be worked out. I hope that the British government and the European Union both use those mechanisms, and if they can be fruitful to iron out any difficulties, then that is this responsible and mature way to deal with it. So unilateral action is not the way to go.
Okay, so Sammy, if what we're hearing, if next Wednesday, the 30th of June, the end of the grace period, if that just gets quietly extended and then forgotten about, will you be happy?
No, I won't, because, of course, the problems which have been arising, the economic problems which have been arising within the grace period anyway. And secondly, extending the grace period will not deal with the issue that Northern Ireland is now subject to laws made in Brussels, while the rest of the laws of the country made at Westminster or Stormont. And as long as that exists, then there's a potential for laws in Northern Ireland to diverge from laws in the rest of the United Kingdom.
But you and the DUP must be kicking yourself that you didn't accept the backstop, which allowed for all this wriggle room in a system which was always going to be imperfect. I mean, how much do you regret that now, when you held the balance of power for 2 years?
I don't, Emily, and the reason is quite simple. Theresa May's solution was far, far worse, because, of course, what Theresa May had proposed was that Northern Ireland would be legally tied to the customs union and the single market, but she had suggested that politically the United Kingdom would stay within existing single market rules and custom union rules. Okay. But there was always the possibility, if we were legally tied, but the rest of the UK was only politically tied, that at any stage, the rest of the UK could opt out anyway, and we'd have been left high and dry, tied to the customs union and to the single market. That's why we rejected Theresa May's solution.
We're out of time, but gentlemen, thank you all very much. Thanks for joining us.